Chapter 2. Sitting with Time. On the ride home that night, after another almost cursed day, I couldn't help but think back to the raven. Not just the way it watched me, but what it might have seen. The raven, one of the most known representations of death, became an almost welcome new symbol for my renewed despair. After Sarah took Noah, there were many days like that day, when I truly believed death would be easier than enduring the life I was left with. Maybe that sounds overly dramatic, and maybe it is, but I do think that feeling was the main reason I went to see Lucian Graves in the first place. There is no other way to put it. My days all look the same, and my nights feel more like slow drownings. All I want is peace, even if it's the kind of peace that you never come back from. Contrary to my desire, I didn't get much sleep that night. I never really do anymore. I feel like I've spent a lifetime running from one problem to another, all of which robs me of enough peace to actually get any real rest. But remembering what I did at Lucian Graves' house, I felt at least I didn't run then. I stayed, and I cleaned. Maybe that's nothing for most people, but for someone like me, lately, that was a lot. Knowing what else I did once again at Ruby's, I still had that sinking gut feeling from guilt when I woke, though. I kept thinking I could clean a filthy house. I can face a fading ghost. I could even stare down a gawking raven, but I couldn't keep a promise to my son. I've asked myself over and over again, what's wrong with me? But every time I think I'm getting closer to an answer, I realize I'm still blaming someone I barely knew. No matter whether it was from above or the ghost below. Noah had been at his grandma's that weekend, just a little over an hour away. Once I finally got his mother to let me, I promised him I'd stop by, even if it was just for a few minutes. I'm sure he was waiting for me, but I never showed up, and his grandmother wouldn't let me speak to him on the phone after I didn't. I guess I, and Lucian Graves, do have more in common than I would have ever thought or hoped for. The main difference is, with his disappearance, it was all at once, and mine has been little by little over the past month or so. That next day at work, I did what I needed to do, but like with most things in my life, I have a way of just getting by. I can go through the motions as well as anyone. I can smile when I need to. I can even laugh or joke around when I feel the time is right. But the truth is, me and being okay couldn't have been any further from the truth. I know I am the Judas of my own life. As sad as that sounds, I'm the one betraying myself through the choices I keep making. I've lost count of how many times I've screamed at the heavens, begging for any kind of answer, anything that might help me change who I've become. But like I said, the answers to my prayers have always been silent, and to me, that silence feels like the greatest betrayal. I guess, in the end, I am just a man sitting with time. Not with answers, not with help, just time. Time I've mostly wasted, and time I'm not even sure I want anymore. Death, to me, gets a free pass anyway. Where life can be full of betrayal, heartbreak, and broken promises, death never lies. It doesn't pretend to be something it's not. With death, you know where you stand, and you don't wake up wondering if it will walk out on you. On the second day, my trip to Lucian Graves' house didn't start out on the old porch swing, and I didn't look up to see if that raven was still there. This time, I was numb to my surroundings and looked at my next visit as just another expected disappointment. It felt like his house was just another stop in a life full of rejection, but I still went. Even I knew disappointment feels better than being alone most of the time. On my return visit, I went straight up to the door and knocked. A nurse let me in right away. Lucian Graves was still looking frail and slouched down in the sheets, but his eyes were cracked open just a little. It was just enough to let me know that he was still inside somewhere. I pulled up one of the old high-back wooden chairs I'd dusted off the day before and sat down beside him. In truth, I didn't know if he'd recognize me, or if he could recognize anyone anymore. His eyes moved a little, but there was no light, no sign of acknowledgement, Just that half-open stare that made me wonder if he was stuck somewhere between here and wherever it is we go next. I didn't say anything right away. I just sat there, listening to the raspy sound of his breath and the beeping of the equipment the nurse had him hooked up to. Out of the blue, after about 10 minutes of sitting next to him, he reached his hand out to me. I hadn't planned on being physical with that man in any way. Not a hug, not a handshake, nothing. To be honest, I still wasn't completely sure why I felt the need to see him at all. Whatever it was, whether pity, confusion, or anything other than admiration, I took his hand in mine. It was cold and clammy, but his grip was still there. That simple connection, after all those years of silence, felt strange. Not healing, not forgiving, just strange. I didn't feel better because of it. I didn't suddenly understand him, or us, or how I'd become just like him. But in that moment, holding the hand of a man I barely knew, I did come to the realization that sometimes just being there for someone speaks for itself, which is a lesson he didn't seem to learn. As far as words go, there were none that day, not a single word from either of us, until I said goodbye to the nurses who were sitting in the other room. That visit, I guess, wasn't about fixing anything or finding the right words to say. Maybe it was just about showing up. Just once. Well, maybe twice. I don't know. I'm not even sure if he knew it was me who was there or if it mattered to him, but something about being in that room, in that silence, made me feel like I had done something right once again, and that alone was such a rarity. I may not have sat on that old porch swing or looked for that lingering black bird when I got there, but before I left, after I shut Lucian Graves' front door, I did stop to revisit the unkindness. This time, however, as I sat down, it was impossible not to notice that my new friend, the Watcher, as I decided to name him, had company. 8, maybe 9 of those midnight-colored birds were perched on the limbs near him, and now they were all peering down at me. I never had any problems recognizing which bird was the Watcher because he was a bit larger than the others, and the feathers on his back shimmered a little different and a little darker. Strangely enough, my return seemed to unsettle him for some reason, because before I sat all the way down, he let out a sharp cry and his newly gathered posse scattered away as fast as they could, leaving just the Watcher and me. Seeing those other ravens fly away so quickly made me think about how most of my life unfolded in a similar way. Those around me always left suddenly, too, and often without too much of a warning. I don't exactly remember when the leaving started, but I do know it always left me sitting in the silence that loneliness always leaves behind. I knew my life hadn't always been like this. I remember feeling blessed, truly blessed, more times than I can count. Some of my first memories, the ones that stick to my heart the most, were about my grandparents and my mother. Back then, love was simple. It came from my family, just being near, and the laughter so often heard throughout our house. As I got older, though, love started to feel more complicated, at least in my mind. I began to think I had to act a certain way or say the right things. I believed, and I still do, that you often have to become someone else just to feel that same kind of appreciation. I don't remember Lucian Graves ever making me feel that way. I was really young when he left, but I still remember him taking me fishing and showing me how to bait a hook. I also remember, right before he left, he got me a puppy who I named Buddy. I tried so hard, but my mother wouldn't let me keep him no matter how much I cried or begged. I only had that dog for a week or so, and then both Buddy and Lucian Graves were gone. I didn't stay on the swing long that night. I couldn't. There was something about that second visit and the way the Watcher scattered his friends so abruptly that made me feel like I wasn't overly welcome there that time. As I left Lucian Graves' house this time, I didn't know if I'd ever return. But I did know that whether it was Odin's or mine, our thoughts and memories couldn't pay the debts that I feel both of us Lucians owe. Like every other night lately, I had nothing left but desperation. This time of year, I think many people feel that anguish from a life that didn't turn out as planned or anywhere near hoped for. But at least in my way of thinking, I was able to borrow a few dollars from Tommy, a friend at work, and if nothing else, I could crawl back into Ruby's, that neon graveyard, to feed the beast once more. I at least had to try to get my mind off the way my life was headed. The pain and feelings of ignorance from my last visit were still there, but as always, I pushed them down just far enough to believe that maybe this time would be different. As soon as I left Lucian Graves' house, I headed straight back to Ruby's like I knew I would. I guess I wanted to see what the devil had in store for me this time. I didn't go straight to the machines, though. I went to the bar first. Maybe I thought I was trying to delay the inevitable, but 2 shots of the cheapest house bourbon later, the hopes of more came knocking as they always did. This time the tempter didn't wait too long to play his tricks. Almost every one of the first 10 spins gave me a little taste. It was just enough to stir up thoughts that maybe someone, somewhere, actually did care about me. It also gave me enough confidence to begin raising my bets little by little. For a while, everything seemed to be working perfectly. The bells of success rang out like the heavens were finally applauding for me. This went on for a full 2 hours, but hope is slick, and the tempter is slicker. The moment I started feeling too blessed, the machine turned cold. I should have known by now that all that initial hope was only to lure me in deeper and deeper. It was just like how Lucian Graves and Sarah lost interest in me. First, there were just a few misses, then longer silences, and then nothing. I kept feeding that beast until all my recent winnings and whatever scraps of pride I had left were gone. All of it vanished, like it never existed. I just sat there, numb, staring at the little leprechaun jumping around on the screen. That bastard grinned at me like he knew exactly what he'd done, or what I'd ignorantly allowed to happen again. Watching that smug ginger crook smirk at me and seeing that arrogant little dance of his on the screen was the final straw. Something inside of me snapped, and it snapped hard. I never thought I'd do something like what I did, but something came over me, and I couldn't stop. I stood up, grabbed both sides of that soulless, blinking, lying machine, and in an absolute fit of rage shoved it over with everything I had. When it hit the floor, it exploded into 100 pieces, but at least that mocking little red-headed leprechaun bastard was finally dead. By the time the police showed up, I didn't run, I didn't argue, I didn't even speak. I just sat there on the casino's nasty, dark paisley carpet with my head tucked down towards my knees. For some ridiculous reason, I think I was breathing easier than I had in months. I knew they'd ban me from Ruby's and probably every other casino within 100 miles, but I felt that alone would be the first real win for me in a long time. I was definitely what you'd call a regular now at Ruby's, but when the police walked me out, I don't think anyone noticed me or what had happened. Most were still hunched over their machines, with their own eyes glazed over from that broken neon promise, and of course, still praying for more. There was no way for me not to notice that lack of acknowledgement, but the facts are, regardless of whatever happened inside, the machines and those wasted prayers never stop, no matter what. To prove my point, that evil machine that just drained my soul was instantly being wheeled away. It was already being replaced by another one just like it. It had an identical red-headed leprechaun jumping around, already starting to entice its next victim, just like nothing ever happened. On the way to my first ever trip to jail, the police officers asked why I'd do such a thing, but I didn't answer. I sat there quietly and strangely at peace. It was a peace like I hadn't felt in a long time. I didn't fight it or even try to explain anything. I figured I already knew what was coming next, but even though I was more than sure I'd screw up again, I prayed this was it. I prayed so hard this was the rock bottom that so many people talked about, and finally a place where I could completely start over again.